A little while back, I was having a hard year. I had just come back to an old job where I was working as a line cook. So that had been my original job, and I had just come back to it after about 10 years I've gone away. And one day I overheard my managers talking. One of them said, I went to my buddy's funeral the other day, and he killed himself. And my other friend had to give the eulogy. And he said, I can't imagine giving a eulogy at a suicide. It seems like it would be too hard. And I had done just that the year before that. And I remember thinking, it wasn't actually that hard. And that was what was hard about it, was that you picture yourself doing something that should be too hard to do. But then it's really quite easy. My brother and I were 5 years apart. He was 5 years older than me. And when we were very little, we had to move back from Canada to Chile. My dad was living here getting a PhD in astrophysics. And when he got his PhD, he wanted to go back to Chile. And my mom didn't want to go back. But basically, my brother and I, through all these times that we moved, there's a line from Slaughterhouse-5, which is that he became unstuck in time. The protagonist of Slaughterhouse-5 has gone to war, and he's not come back very well. And we're not sure if he hallucinates or time travels, but his life becomes a series of unstable episodes that don't quite go together. So yeah, moving to Chile was quite a shock to us, and soon after that, my dad left because my mom was a very difficult woman. She'd had a lot of traumatic brain injuries, and she had a lot of problems with her decision-making and her emotions, so she was someone that was not fun to hang around with. After my dad left, my brother decided that all the shit he was going through should roll downwards, down to me in the form of bullying, so he spent about the next 4 years just bullying me. And throughout that time, all I ever wanted was for him to love me, but his constant abuse really made me angry and shut down. Around age 15, he decided that he was done being mean to me, whether it was because he had just started taking up marijuana smoking or because he had realized that he had truly broken me, and when he tried to bully me, I just couldn't feel anything anymore. I think the fun of sadism is probably to get a rise out of someone, right? But when he became nicer, by this time we were 10 and 15, and he was getting into music. So he started to share his music with me, He was into English new wave music from the late 70s, English punk rock, Sex Pistols, The Cure. My first job was actually shaving his mohawk when he was 16. They gave me 50 pesos, and I felt very, very important. Once we got into the Smiths, though, something bad happened, which is that my brother listened to the album Meat is Murder, and he decided to become a vegetarian. But as it turns out, our family has something called pernicious anemia, which is excessive lack of B12 vitamin. Now, pernicious means deadly, so it's an anemia that for a long time they didn't know how to cure. They knew how to cure iron deficiency, but not this other one, so people would die. So after my brother became a vegetarian, he became very depressed, and he lost all his motivation. He was despondent, and it wasn't until much later that we would find out that we all have this problem, but there wasn't Google in the 80s where you could Google what kind of vitamins you need to take when you're a vegetarian. When we moved back here, we were 12 and 17, and I think I was just young enough that I was still a kid and I could adapt to this culture. I learned English way faster, and he was just struggling. My brother never really adapted to living here, but he became just Canadian enough that when he went back to Chile, he was also not satisfied. So his whole adult life was spent, between mental hospitals and moving back and forth between our two countries, because I don't think he could ever really fit in either one of them. One of the things that my brother and I shared was a love of movies, and we used to quote these movies to each other incessantly. We used to have basically our own vernacular that only we understood. For example, we used to love a movie called Blow Up, which is it's a movie that's set in England, but it's directed by an Italian, and it's based on a story by an Argentinian, so it's just the kind of international bit of snobbery that we could bond over. And there's a scene where a guy tries to buy a painting at an antique store, and the guy that runs the store says, "Sorry, no landscapes," even though he's standing right next to a landscape. He's just trying to get rid of him. I don't really know why. But that was my brother and I's way of saying no, was sorry, no landscapes. Which we eventually just shortened to no landscapes, which is made even less sense as we went along. But yeah, one of the things that we also had in common was our love of Night of the Living Dead, pretty much the original zombie movie from 1968. It's a really low-budget black and white film that only had 2 paid actors. Everybody else was like a friend of the director or actually the director. And in the beginning of Night of the Living Dead, there are these siblings. They're called Barbara and Johnny. And Barbara is afraid of a man at the cemetery because he seems sketchy. And Johnny obviously makes fun of her and says, "Ooh, they're coming to get you, Barbara." But, pride before the fall means that Johnny immediately gets killed by the zombie at the cemetery. And then Barbara spends all of this movie just having a mental breakdown. She seeks refuge in a little house, but she's incapable of doing anything. She's just in like a fugue state. She finds like a music box and she just stares at it. And meanwhile, she meets another guy at the house. His name is Ben. And Ben is one of my favorite characters in movies. He's so smart and strong. He keeps fighting. He boards up the house. And he deals with Barbara, who's just not doing anything at all. My brother, his favorite character was always Barbara, the person who just couldn't cope. And my favorite character was Ben, because he was trying, When you live with someone who's suicidal, you're sort of like in a hostage situation. Like if you go to rob a bank and it goes sideways and you end up in a hostage situation, if you're one of the hostages, there's just so much tension, Someone could die any moment. Someone might not die, but the situation drags on and on. Over time, you start to wish that the situation would end one way or another. So I think I did eventually start to think, well, if you just killed yourself, we wouldn't have to keep waiting. Obviously, I came to regret that over time. When my brother finally died, it was time for someone to give his eulogy, and I knew that I could do it right. So I told a story, which is that when my brother went to my high school, he made this art piece of a man lying in bed with big, teary eyes. And he's all alone, and he's looking up at the ceiling, but we also see the sky. The night sky is full of stars. I don't know if the stars are a reference to my dad, who's an astronomer, but he read to his class a song from the Smiths, which is Asleep. I don't know if you guys know that song. And the song says, "Sing me to sleep, I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Don't feel bad for me, I want you to know, deep in the cell of my heart, I really want to go." He photocopied these lyrics and gave them all to the class, and then he told me that no one really took the lyrics with them. He found them all on the desks or on the floor, and he took that really hard. And I remember thinking, like, who gives a shit what they think? Why do you care? But after he died, it hit me, he was trying to tell us something. He was trying to tell us, how bad he was really doing. But, fellow teenagers are not the right audience for that. But that's the story I told at his eulogy, and I think I did a pretty good job. But the hardest part of the eulogy is that I kind of wish that, even though I wanted to honor him with a great story and some nice words, part of me wished that I were incapable of it, that I could just break down and cry and not be able to do it. So that's definitely the hardest performance of my life, where doing well and doing badly both seem equally undesirable. Thank you, guys.